steady love, strong enough, it won't cave in. I'll be with you wherever you dare to go until the end, yeah. Before you know it, things are gonna get better. Before you know it, you'll be standing on the other side. You've got no reason to be worried about forever. This very moment, before you know it, sooner than later you'll be living in the answer of every prayer that you prayed when you thought your hope was gone. For all you know, maybe a miracle has happened. This very moment, before you know it. I know you can see it right.
Hey everybody, I'm really excited to be here with a captive audience to talk about some of my favorite topics, so thanks for everybody for coming. And you'll realize why I'm saying that in a little bit, but Josh was the one that originally invited me up here today. Reason being, we usually meet pretty regularly, maybe once a month, when we're able to escape and discuss a number of different topics, things that we're reading usually. But oftentimes I dive into some of the more scientific aspects of things, and I think he got a little tired of that and said, hey, you should talk about this on a Sunday, to try and kind of shut me up. So here I am. That's how I ended up here. But there's so many different scientific topics that I enjoy to go through and enjoy talking about, especially when it comes to evangelism and how we can talk to others and use that to our advantage to try and bring people towards Christ. So while I was prepping for this, I kept talking to my wife about, I don't know how I'm going to keep this less than like an hour, because there's so many topics that I would love to dive into, and I've tried to really keep this reined in, so please forgive me if it takes a little bit, and I hope I don't put anybody to sleep. But some of the things that I really enjoy, obviously medicine, but most people don't know I was actually a chemistry major in college, and really love diving back into that. So this allowed me that opportunity, and it was a real pleasure. So if you have any more desire for some of the things that I talk about today, or you want to talk about them further, please find me. I'm more than happy to grab a coffee or something, and we can dive into some of these topics even more in depth. What I settled on talking about, though, is just to kind of give you a little taste of some of the scientific topics that are very commonly stated or talked about in media or our general culture today, and how they're not always as they're presented, and the confidence we have in them is not always as it seems. And then discussing a little bit about how we can use our Bible as, my talk states, evidence-based for our faith. So let's dive into a few things. After graduating medical school, I met up with a close friend, one of my best friends from college down in Oklahoma. We knew each other from college as he was studying biomedical sciences, I think is what the major was, and I was in chemistry. So all of our courses ended up overlapping multiple times. We met in multiple courses and started hanging out, talking about a lot of the things we were reading. We'd exercise together. We went and do polar plunges in Lake Michigan in the winter months. So we were challenging each other all the time in many different ways. Now, our conversations would always end up in a religious aspect pretty regularly, as he was atheistic in nature and I'm Christian. He knew that pretty well. So when I arrived at this campsite, we were down in Oklahoma, and we had a great meal, and we're just catching up on some things as I was discussing, being excited to be done with med school. He asked me something that really stuck with me for a long time. He said, how do you feel about Christianity after you've been through medical school? Do you still have confidence in what the Bible states? And he almost was expecting me to be like, well, this is challenging, and this is, but the surprising thing to him was, I said, oh no, I have a stronger faith than I ever have, and medical school only exemplified it for me. There's so much of this expectation that the more you learn and the more you dive into science, that it's going to pull you away from the Bible. But in reality, there's so many scientific people that are so high up. The people that do, or the individual who actually first sequenced DNA actually is an extremely strong Christian. I would encourage you all to seek him out, but you'll find that there are so many leaders in the scientific community that are extremely biblically based, and believe in the Bible wholly. So I want to provide you some confidence today, knowing that the more that media pushes that Christianity is non-scientific, that's not the case at all. So let's get into one of the most common concerns that I see in science and how it might not be exactly what you think it is. So as a chemistry major, you begin with basic reactions. You start doing a lot of math and a lot of chemical reactions in the primary courses. And then you build on that and build on that, going towards more and more complex reactions, and finally get to some of the building blocks of how we function, which is DNA. And if you go through college courses or anything medical or science, you'll get DNA bashed into your head about 1,000 times at the beginning of pretty much every course. So it's something that you learn regularly and in pretty significant depth. And don't worry, this is the only scientific topic that I'm going to hit on, okay? One of the things that I focused in on was biochemistry, so DNA was a huge part of my learning. One of the things that they glance over multiple times is how closely DNA is related with humans to chimpanzees. Oftentimes people say monkeys, but it's actually chimpanzees that we're the closest related to. Okay? And for a quick review, DNA is a double helix. Okay, so stick with me here. It's basically two strands of sugars, and then there's these pairs that go in between that stretch through the whole thing. And that's what makes up all the information that makes each one of you, you. So, the most widely accepted model for development of modern-day humans is that we evolved, right, from these, not chimpanzees per se, but a close relative of them, which we don't have any fossil record of, but they think that's the case. Now, our DNA relation to chimpanzees, though, is about 98.6%, right? So sounds really impressive, right? But let's think about how much information is actually in DNA, right? One cell in your body, if you stretched out the DNA, just end to end, it would actually reach higher than me. I'm only 5'10", and it would reach around 6 feet. If you did that for every cell in your body, it would go to and from Earth to the sun over 600 times, okay? So the amount of information that's in DNA is insane. It gets me excited just thinking about it. It's so crazy. So they state that, so then bringing it back to DNA from chimpanzees to humans, 98.6% is huge, but that means that there's actually 35 million of these pairs that are different from humans to chimpanzees. Okay, so it's a lot. So that's just to kind of give you perspective that even though we're very similar, we're also very different. And another thing to think about is mice have a 97% similarity with us, okay? So, yeah, so it's all, you can see already, it's very easy to say numbers of things, and they don't really mean what you think, okay? And people use that to their advantage all the time. Now, going a little bit further with this, if we look at DNA and those 35 million that are different from us to chimpanzees, okay? They often state that there's only certain DNA that actually is important. And they'll say that this is around 3 million of those base pairs are actually important, that code proteins that actually make up things that are important for us. But in the last 5 to 10 years, they've actually found that all the DNA, they used to call it junk DNA, is actually extremely important for how DNA functions itself, because it will fold in on itself and help in how it actually functions. So, Josh is already laughing here because I'm getting a little in-depth, but basically, stick with me here, it's basically everything is important, and the more we learn about it, the more we realize that. So, now we have an idea of what DNA is, how different we are from our closest evolutionary ancestors. How quickly could we have changed from chimpanzees to humans is the next kind of step. So if you look at a study from 2010, this is the most recent one I've been able to find, and then there's another one in 2005 and 2000 that have kind of progressed. The rate of change is around 1.1 times 10 to the negative 8 per generation. I know that means nothing to anyone here, but what that really is it's about 3.5 of those pairs change per year, okay? And this is kind of a pretty intense study that they did. They actually took a whole family and sequenced their whole DNA, right? So that to the Earth and Sun 600 times, they did that for each person and it figured out the entirety of it and then compared it. So it's a pretty big task. So now that we have the amount of DNA, 35 million base pairs, and the rate of change, around 3.5 change per year, we just do simple math. 35 million divided by 3.5. I know, it's simpler than it sounds. It's around 10 million. 10 times 3.5 equals 35, so 10 million, okay? Thank you. Thank you. So, so if we get to this 10 million years, right, that's exactly where, if you ever hear about it, you'll see that's the number that they take for how long it took for us to get from chimpanzees to humans, and that's what the fossil record shows. So, this is where you get that it took us 10 million years to evolve, right? Okay. Now, do you see the problems with that? Probably not. It's okay. So basically, if you look at this, right, we have 3 billion different pieces of our DNA, okay? And we're saying that every year, only 3.5 of those change, potentially, right? So we're saying our mutations picked the 3.5 or 35 million out of the 3 billion every single time for 10 million years. It would have to be perfect for 10 million years for this to occur. So what is the likelihood of that, right? Yes, improbable is putting it lightly. So you have basically out of a 3 billion divided by 35 million, it's about a 1.1 in 100 chance of occurring once, okay? But it has to occur for 10 million years every year to have this happen, okay? There's been some studies that have tried to figure out how long this would take if you put into it all the other things that could potentially change DNA, but the problem is this is the most consistent one that we know of. So when they tried to put this into a calculator and put some other variables in there, they actually found that the time that it would take to be more probable would be greater than the entire timeline of the whole universe, okay? So the probability of this is difficult to accept at best. And during school, they kind of glaze over these things, right? Because most people don't want to kind of dive into these topics that we just don't really have good answers for at all. But they're projected in media and in a lot of news articles that you read as truth, because in reality, it is the best evidence we have based on science, okay? But the likelihood of it actually occurring is extremely improbable, okay? So, I don't want to also, with kind of these things that I'm saying, I don't want you to just think that all science is trash, okay? And that we're just being projected all these things that are false truths, because that's not the case. Medicine per se, we have to have hundreds of studies that promote certain things or actually show safety before we're even allowed to try drugs. My wife worked in pharmaceuticals, and the amount of work they put into actually approving things to be safe is frustrating, to say the least. So even though this is, I'm kind of sowing some doubt in some things here, I don't want to sow that in everything that you see scientifically. So that was it for the science, okay? So hopefully some of you are stuck with it, and if you have questions about that, please come and ask. I'm more than happy to discuss it further. But let's go into a different scenario. So in medical school, we had rotations where we'd stick with a number of people. We would have these groups that were our kind of clinical core groups where we had 4 or 5 different individuals, and we would all rotate together in OB, family medicine, psychiatry, surgery. So we were seeing, life and death and bringing life into the world. It was really a great experience for us to kind of connect. And that's why they did it, so that we grew stronger together and challenged each other and pushed each other forward. But at the end of each rotation, with these individuals that we knew very well, we would always, go and celebrate after we finished our clinical rotations and our exams, and kind of discuss and vent and talk about the things that we experienced during that time. So one of these individual times, it kind of starts almost like a joke. I'm in this restaurant with my group involved a Hindu, an atheist, a Catholic, and me, a Christian, right? So a very diverse group, very diverse. It was a lot of fun. And we all, really got along well. We enjoyed each other's company and went through a lot together. So at one of these rotation at the end, we started discussing religion, as you'd expect. We dived into a lot of different topics, and that came up naturally. And they turned to me and asked, well, why do you believe in Christianity? So I just kind of posed this to you guys. What would you say if you're in a group of, prospective doctors? How do you feel confident in the things that you would be able to talk to them, or do you feel like you could articulate fully exactly what your faith is, and could you defend it? So this brings me back to the verse, 1 Peter 3:15. If you guys want to turn there, we will come back to that in a moment, but I'll read it for you now. Be always ready to make a defense to anyone who asks you for an account concerning the hope that is in you. And I had always taken this kind of at face value, that I should be able to answer questions when they're posed about my faith, why I believe what I believe. So one of the things that's important here is I'm going to go to kind of what my answer was for this question when they posed it. In medical school, I met one of the smartest people I know who was a very strong Christian, Dr. Dudley. He led the CMDA group there, which is Christian Medical and Dental Association, which was kind of a Christian group that would allow students from all the different organizations to come together, and we would have Bible studies together. He kind of took me under his wing and taught me a number of things. And one of the things in medical school that's really important is we're bashed into our head from day one that everything you do should be evidence-based. Everything you do. You should never put someone's life in danger or make a decision that is based off of a whim, okay? Because we need to do our absolute best to, save lives and provide the best treatment that we can possible. So I always wanted to, be able to talk with my fellow classmates in a way that was effective. And since that was kind of the way that was really taught for us, that's kind of what Dr. Dudley really kind of pursued, was how can we talk about our faith in an evidence-based manner. So one of the best examples that I have from his time and some of the things that I learned from him is in Ezekiel. So if you guys want to turn to Ezekiel 26, that's what I'm going to be reading from. And then just bookmark the 1 Peter, because we'll be back in that in a minute. So, Ezekiel 26. In the 11th month of the 12th year, on the first day of the month, the word of the Lord came to me. Son of man, because Tyre has said of Jerusalem, Aha, the gate to the nation is broken, and its doors have swung open to me. Now that she lies in ruins, I will prosper. Therefore, this is what the sovereign Lord says. I am against you, Tyre, and I will bring many nations against you. Like the sea casting up its waves, they will destroy the walls of Tyre and pull down her towers. I will scrape away her rubble and make her a bare rock. Out in the sea, she will become a place to spread fish nets, for I have spoken, declares the sovereign Lord. She will become plunder for the nations, and her settlements on the mainland will be ravaged by the sword. Then you will know that I am the Lord. For this is what the sovereign Lord says, from the north I am going to bring against Tyre Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, king of kings, with horses and chariots, with horsemen and a great army. He will ravage your settlements on the mainland with the sword. He will set up siege works against you, build a ramp up to your walls, and raise his shields against you. He will direct the blows of his battering rams against your walls and demolish your towers and his weapons, with his weapons. His horses will be so many that they will cover you with dust. Your walls will tremble at the noise of the war horses, wagons, and chariots when he enters your city gates, as men enter a city whose walls have been broken through. The hooves of his horses will trample all your streets. He will kill your people with the sword, and your strong pillars will fall to the ground. They will plunder your wreath or your wealth and loot your merchandise. They will break down your walls and demolish your fine houses and throw your stones, timber, and rubble into the sea. I will put an end to your noisy songs, and the music of your harps will be heard no more. I will make you a bare rock, and you will become a place to spread fish nets. You will never be rebuilt, for I, the Lord, have spoken, declares the sovereign Lord. So, history and geography are helpful here. The name Tyre is actually really for the Phoenician city-state at the time, which was, in all purposes, kind of a good comparison of New York City is today. It was extremely strong in its naval power at the time and its commercial dominance, known for kind of purple cloth as well, as kind of a fun little tidbit. So it was a major sitting point of the Mediterranean. And then something about the actual structure of the city. You had a mainland, and then right off the shore, about 540 yards away, you had an island that had just as strong of a city on top of it, with walls and everything else that they described. So there's a lot here, and it's quite a prophecy with multiple portions and multiple parts. But let's kind of pick it apart a little bit. So verse 3, 7, 8, and 9, Nebuchadnezzar would besiege the mainland, Tyre, and plunder it. This actually happens. If we look back in history, there's multiple sources that state that King Nebuchadnezzar, who was extremely powerful at the time, along with the Bible, in 585 through 573 BC, so quite a long time, he besieged the city, and he was able to conquer the mainland. He actually plundered it and took a majority of it, but what they do, or what Tyre did in that time period, is if they were attacked, and they had this idea that if they were taken, they could go to that island, and they have this huge naval power, and it's quite a ways away. You can't just plop an army over the sea. So they were safe there, and that's what they did. So what happened here, right? The prophecy isn't fulfilled. How does that work? Well, they actually mention this later on in Ezekiel. If you turn to chapter 29, you don't do that now, but you can do it later. It actually talks about how he was unable to actually defeat and do what was stated in that biblical text, and he was actually given Egypt later on to as kind of a reward for the blood and sweat that his army utilized to do what God had asked. Now, verse 4 and 14, what about this portion that says, "It will be a bare rock, throw your stones, timber, and rubble into the sea"? So if we go 200 years in the future, okay, in 332 BC, you have Alexander the Great on his huge crusade of battles is going down the coast. He's coming from the north with multiple armies that he used as mercenary groups. And they come upon Tyre. They try to negotiate with them to join the Greeks, and they refuse. So he naturally tries to attack and takes over the mainland city. They do the same thing that they did when Nebuchadnezzar came, and they retreat to that island portion. So what does Alexander do? Does he give up? No. He actually has his army take the entire city, throw it into the sea to make a causeway to the island to take the rest of the Tyre down. There's never been anything like that done, ever. And there never has been since. So he fulfilled this prophecy 200 years later, exactly as it stated. It'd be a bare rock, throw your stones, timber, and rubble into the sea. And he did exactly that. Now, what did they do with the actual people? Well, he killed half of them and then sold the other half that was left into slavery throughout the empire. And then what was left of that city, they established a little Greek city-state. That is what Alexander did as he went through. So the Phoenician Empire that once was completely decimated and gone. But there was still some of that Phoenician city that was still there on top of the island. Okay? Now, if we go to verse 14, kind of the last portion of that prophecy, it will never be rebuilt. The Phoenician Empire itself, or those people, were completely gone, right? They were all either sold off into slavery or killed. But you still have that portion that was on that island. And there would be other empires that would come by, the Romans, the Crusaders, the Ottoman, the Macedonians, and they would all come through and actually establish little portions there because it was a great port area. So if you go a little bit further in time, in 551 AD, there was actually a huge earthquake and tsunami that occurred that actually swept what was left of that Phoenician city off into the sea, to the point now where if you go on Google and you look up Tyre, you'll actually find some type of city there, and it will look like there's something there. But there's actually no consensus on where the city Tyre was anymore because of the sediment and things that washed away that causeway, as well as the island that was kind of taken into the sea in 551. There's actually no archaeological findings of that original Phoenician empire. The only thing that they're able to find now is the Roman settlements that were put on there a few hundred years later. So literally every single portion of this prophecy was fulfilled. Oh, one more piece I forgot. It will become a place to spread fish nets. So if you go online and look for what is the main economic value of that area, Encyclopedia Britannica, I can't even pronounce it, Britannica, states that if you look at it exactly, it states the income of modern day population is fishing, okay? So it literally, every single thing that was in that prophecy was fulfilled. Not in the way that it was expected, and it took hundreds of years, but it was fulfilled. And so how can we use this as an evidence-based argument? Do we have anything that can say that this actually occurred and they didn't just alter the text after? Yeah, we have the old Dead Sea Scrolls, because they're dated back to 356 BC, which is around 30 years prior to Alexander the Great actually even coming down from the north, okay? So we have evidence of a supernatural event occurring through this prophecy where God's word was stated and fulfilled accurately over a few hundred years, okay? Probably too much, I get, but when we're talking on a evidence-based kind of idea, this is the things that are the most applicable for those that I feel want something that is tangible, something that you can look at and say, this is supernatural, and you can look at it today, and it proves that the Bible is something that is unique and different from anything else in ever. There's no books, nothing that has been ever written like this that has such in-depth and detailed prophecies that come true over the course of hundreds of years where there was no physical way possible that they could have predicted it, okay? So, this is what I stated to that group because I wanted to use something, not just how my life has changed, which it had greatly over the time that I've been involved in Christianity, but I wanted to provide them with something tangible, something that was non-refutable. And what was their answer? Well, that's just one example. That was the response I got back to that. So I wanted to dive into how, well, wait, there's Daniel's prophecy of multiple different civilizations that would come down. King Cyrus and his reign was predicted 200 years prior to it ever happening. Or the 300 prophecies that Jesus himself fulfills, right? There's so many in the Bible, but it felt like that was only going to add fuel to the fire and probably not be as beneficial for any of the seeds that I already planted through what I discussed. So I just want you to kind of take away from this that people are not always willing or ready to hear even the best answers that we have available. And even if you have answers that you feel are, the best and provide supernatural evidence, it's difficult when people have hard hearts or have beliefs that they don't want to change, right? I always wondered when I was growing up, when I read these Bible stories of the Israelites coming out of Egypt, and then they saw all these miraculous signs, and they immediately go and worship a calf. You're like, how? How could that happen if they had just seen all this? And then you present things today to people that are supernatural and doesn't even faze them, right? It's very easy to go through life and have a hard heart and just not change because you're comfortable, okay? So let's go back to 1 Peter 3. Originally I read verse 15, but I want to go back all the way to verse 8. So to sum up, all of you are harmonious, sympathetic, brotherly, kind-hearted, and humble in spirit, not returning evil for evil or insult for insult, but giving blessing instead. For you were called for the very purpose that you might inherit a blessing. For the one who desires life to love and see good days must keep his tongue from evil and his lips from speaking deceit. He must turn away from evil and do good. He must seek peace and pursue it. For the eyes of the Lord are toward the righteous, and his ears attend to their prayer. But the face of the Lord is against those who do evil. Who is there to harm you if you prove zealous for what is good? But even if you should suffer for the sake of righteousness, you are blessed. And do not fear their intimidation, and do not be troubled, but sanctify Christ as Lord in your hearts, always being ready to make a defense to everyone who asks you to give an account for the hope that is in you, yet with gentleness and reverence, and keep a good conscience, so that in the thing in which you are slandered, those who revile your good behavior in Christ will be put to shame. For it is better, if God should will it so, that you suffer for doing what is right rather than for doing what is wrong. It's really easy to miss the forest for the trees here. And focusing on verse 15, which is something that I had focused on for a long time, trying to be that smartest person in the room or have the answers for everything, able to beat back arguments with a better one, is really, I don't think, the focus here. The focus is on being zealous to do what is good, respecting and being gentle to others when you're on the defensive. When I try to examine where I've seen real change and what has brought others closer to Christ, it almost never is arguments or things that I've said. It's pretty much always, they come back to me and say that they've seen actions or the way that my life is that truly has an impact. This is why everything you do, say, and every good and bad word that comes out of your mouth matters. And every action you take pulls others towards or away from Christ. And we'll answer for every single one of them. So I wanted to share all these things to encourage you. Hopefully I didn't put too many people asleep with some of those things. But you don't have to get an MD or have a biblical scholarly degree to be able to make change in people's lives. Often, even the best, well-thought-out answers don't really produce any fruit, as I said. But everything you do, and every day, you have opportunities to love your neighbor, and I believe that that's where our real change is made. So let's pray. Thank you, God, for the grace that you provided us and the opportunities that you give us every day. Please help us and guide us to make decisions to make sure we're leading as many as we can towards you with all of our actions and our words and all that we do. In your heavenly name, amen.